Beware of the murder meme. There is madness afoot in the land. People are literally running amok. Their behavior reminds me of the movie Night of the Living Dead. It is as though people are being infected with a deadly mind virus that drives them into horrible acts of violence against each other. When it strikes, people suddenly become soulless, degenerate creatures without empathy or self-control. This mind virus seems to feed off the worst kinds of emotional extremes that end in despicable acts of violence. I believe this virtually invisible mental microbe is a violence mem every bit as infectious and overpowering as any physical virus. This mem/virus is infecting the whole world today, bringing about a violence pandemic. To survive, it needs fear, hate, stress, so it shows up where extreme emotions predominate. When it manifests, one gets a wild urge to inflict pain just to see someone else hurt. Evidence of its presence historically can be found in the worst personal and social qualities of perverted leaders, tyrants, bullies, and demented criminals. It survives in some of the most inconspicuous, subtle, and even comedic productions like ABC's television show Wipeout, where audiences gather to see other people thrown about, perhaps even permanently maimed for life. It hides in the sick emotions generated by thrill sports like car races where people enjoy the excitements of wrecks. This negative viral energy is nourished by the nation's lust for highly flammable emotional confrontations generated by gladiator blood sports. Ground and pound events heighten its strength. It surfaces in the perverted zeal to squeeze a trigger to feel the power over some innocent creature or unsuspecting individual. Clearly, this insidious mem has highly specialized receptors for absorbing toxic emotional chemicals from a frenzied limbic system. Emotionally tinged mass gatherings spread the virus. It is especially attracted to highly agitating, hysterical speeches where collective paranoia gives it power. It can even surface during fires, funerals, car accidents, situations where people gather to the sound of sirens and screaming. Coincidentally, the virus drives producers to make movies that draw imbalanced people to view vicious, murderous acts when the real thing isn't available. This mem does this specifically to feed off the intensity of the horror in each well-orchestrated scene. Unilaterally, it is manufacturing a whole army of hosts which it can drive at will. The violence mem is infecting the world. Socially, it feeds off fear, hatred, bigotry, religious intolerance, poverty, and, yes, even loneliness. Terrorism is the passion fruit of its evil spawn. The murder mem particularly haunts the U.S., where nearly every day we witness the horror of gang violence, random shootings, and sudden spontaneous massacres. It spares no one, infecting the young and old alike. Its insidious presence creeps into urban and suburban worlds to infect the innocent. We get sightings of this invisible destroyer of sanity when our children, fathers or mothers suddenly flip out, go berserk, gunning down their loved ones or fellow students by the dozens before executing themselves. Its infectious, destructive swath sweeps back and forth across the nation in cycles of insane, often meaningless, wholesale slaughter. Just recently, we saw the effects of this vicious mem materialize outside a mall in Arizona in the attempted assassination of Republican Gabrielle Giffords and the senseless murder of 5 other people, including a federal judge. No one is safe and no one is spared. It is the dawn of the night of the living dread mem, the most infectious and destructive killing virus ever known to humanity. The aforementioned events are only a few in a long line of killings. I have personally been keeping up with the appearance of this highly toxic creature of the mind for many years. I know that it feeds off the visceral high anxiety of our times. Perhaps it was evoked by the particularly negative, stressful energy of our present political and economic issues, but vestiges of it were here since time memorial. However, there are those in our society who are its carriers, those who, perhaps unintentionally, cultivate our minds for the inoculation of its spore. They nourish the maim's longevity by encouraging us to engage in fighting, revenge, or when they teach us to sabotage each other and our government. As a professional sensitive, I have tuned into its effects upon an individual. For instance, it invades the mind of a person during an emotional issue such as anger, fear, or depression. When this occurs, the individual might feel an overwhelming, uncontrollable urge to do something unusually violent. At first, such a person may quickly become highly nervous, somewhat disoriented, or experience vertigo. Usually, these symptoms follow the initial phase of the inoculation. The maim thrives on any imbalance or weakness in one's character, such as jealousy, low self-esteem, sexual hang-ups, suspicions, paranoia, etc. When it is well entrenched within a person's mind, it radically distorts one's perceptions and alters their ability to reason. Thus, these victims will often tend to overact against minor agitations and behave aggressively. There are those among us who are semi-conscious of the presence of this toxic invader and have created programs to counter and hopefully eliminate its presence. This is why there are numerous spiritual teachers evolving in our midst, those who are trying to engender a modicum of reservation, loving tolerance, and a peaceful state of mind. Gentler methods of social communication are the only antidotes that can offset these invasive mind microbes. The other alternative, a probable end game, its demise may come after it has parasitically sucked the life energy from humans and we have destroyed each other. Then it will automatically decode and dissolve, going back into that negative field from whence it came. Namaste.